When you think of India, you probably imagine a less developed country. The truth is that it used to be among the world's most developed countries. India hasn't always been poor. Once upon a time, it was indeed economically and industrially more advanced than most countries. In the 15th century and before that, people believed that the world consisted of Asia, Europe, and Africa. People weren't aware of the existence of America or Oceania. India was such a great place with a lot of spices and other merchandise. The Spanish explorer Christopher Columbus wanted to find a shorter way to India, so instead of sailing all the way around Africa, he believed that he could just sail west and that it would lead him directly to India, but it didn't. Columbus arrived in Cuba and thus by accident discovered America in 1492. But that is not going to be our focus in this video. Back to India. At first, India was a divided country. It was divided into many smaller principalities which constantly were at war with each other. India's culture was so diverse that it could be considered a whole continent. It had so many small tribes and different languages, and it was possible to tell where people came from just by looking at them. But then the Mughal Empire came in 1526.
The Mughal prince Babur came from a small kingdom in a part of the former Soviet Union that nowadays is called Turkestan and is a part of the country called Kazakhstan. Babur began his conquest from there in the year 1504 and he conquered Kabul in Afghanistan. In 1519 he started his first expeditions to India. In 1524, with an army of 12,000 men, he marched to Delhi, where he managed to conquer the Delhi Sultanate. The great Mughal emperors created an efficient Islamic empire. The administration was so efficient that the great Mughals became some of the richest rulers the world has ever seen. Babur established a new Islamic empire. They reigned formally until 1858. However, by that time, its heyday were long gone.
4 British merchants each paid £30,000 to King of Britain for the right to have full control of all trade that went through India. The company demanded a monopoly on the Indian trade from the Indian king. The king refused, and then the company made the king's life very difficult. The company made it impossible for other trade ships to get to the Indian coast. In the end, the Indian king had to give the company the monopoly on the Indian trade. The company got the monopoly in 1615. It was one of the representatives from the company, William Hawkins, who asked for the permission to trade in India, but was put off for 2 years. The Indians gave the company permission to trade in India in 1612, and from that year the Englishmen controlled the trade in India. The company traded metals like silver for spices, indigo, silk, and cotton fabrics.
After the fall of the Mughal Empire, a lot of new states were formed. Nevertheless, historians have described the conditions as chaotic and influenced by many crises. This is only partly true. Towns such as Delhi, Agra, Lahore, which has all been central places in the Mughal Empire, experienced periods of recession. However, other new centuries were formed. In Bengal, the provincial governor took advantage of the weakening emperor. Formerly, he acknowledged the emperor's sovereignty, but he had created an actual independent state with the capital town of Murshidabad. Awadh, the Mughal Empire's most important province, witnessed a similar process. Lucknow became a new political and economical center as well. Governors who in the same way subjected to the regional kings were known as Nawabs in the 18th century. In the western part of India, the Marathas created a strong fusion of warrior states. For a long period of time, the defenseless Kaiser of Delhi stood directly under their protection. Further south, in Mysore, Hyder Ali and later his son Tipu Sultan created a well-organized and efficient state.
A development was in progress in which the Mughal Empire was substituted by a number of small regional states which competed among each other. The political conditions became more and more similar to the situation in Europe. One difference was that the states in India were young and the system was therefore very unstable. In the 18th century, India was characterized by the wars between the new centers of power. Along the coast, Europeans, mostly British and French, had settled. In 1640, the East India Company had acquired land around Madras, and in return they had to protect the local Hindu prince. In no time, the company had become one of London's biggest workplaces. In the 17th century, the company's possessions were split into 3 administrative units, each with its own governor: Madras, Bombay, and Bengal. In every unit, independent institutions like the administrations of justice and tax collection were established. The company had acquired the zamindar rights in Bengal, which gave the company the right to collect tax where the best land was, and in 1662 they had their own army.
The French had insignificant control in India. They did, however, have control of Pondicherry, which was just some 100 miles from Madras. Generally, the Europeans had possessions in India because of their interest in India's cotton textile industry. They were organizing companies such as the British, the East India Company, or the French.
Compagnie Française de l'Indie.
The Europeans made money in 2 ways. One was by transporting silver coins with which they paid cotton goods. They then could go back to Europe with the cotton goods and make a profit. And also going to various parts of Asia with goods and trading them. During the 18th century, collecting taxes became an important source of income, especially for the British. The British paid some money to rich Indians in order to get the right to collect taxes in a certain area. Already in the 1740s, the British and French were involved in the conflicts between the unstable Indian states. By this time, the companies had so much power that they could help with an army when there was a war.
In the 18th century, the Mughal Empire was disintegrating, and because of that, a fight for the throne began. The local Nawab's successor, his grandson Shihab-ud-Dawla, collided with the British because the British has chosen the side of his opponent Nawab. On June the 20th, 1756, he marched on the British headquarters in Calcutta with a large army. Fort William, as it was called, was overrun, and the surviving British were thrown in their own military prison. Multiple soldiers died in the prison because of the heat and the lack of provisions and the water. This was later known as the Black Hole of Calcutta. The British company was so provoked because of the attack that they sent Robert Clive, a company official, to Calcutta with the intentions of punishing Shihab-ud-Dawla. In 1757, at Plassey, Clive defeated Shihab and installed a new Mauryan Nawab that was under the control of the company, and now they had control over Bengal. In the long run, this led to the colonization of India. England did not set out to conquer India, but after the provocations from the India people, it led to the complete control of the country.
The period from 1858 until World War I is considered the golden age of imperialism. Often it goes by the name High Noon of the Empire. It is in this period that India could rightfully be called the jewel of the empire, but it was also in this period that Indians began to demand participation in the decisions making involving the country. Until the 17th century, communication between Europe and other parts of the world was difficult and slow, but means of transportation like the railway system, steamboats, and modern communication systems, which were based on the telegram and also postal distribution, made it possible to send goods and information from one end of the world to the other much quicker than ever before. New sea routes were also made because of the Suez Canal made in 1969.
The new infrastructure in India connected former small states into a fully connected India. The infrastructure was one of the benefits of the English Empire. The English language was also a benefit in the sense of it could connect the Indians across the country. There were so many different languages in India that even some Indians didn't understand each other. so the British really helped them with a common tongue. But India was a successful country before England arrived, so one could argue that India might have accomplished these things by themselves if England hadn't intervened. The British were able to control this vast country because of the pioneering of the weapon industry. Small divisions of English soldiers were able to repel a large number of Indians with their modernized weapons. New medicine was also made, which made the colonization of India much easier. It led to many British women moving to India.
The sepoys consisted of a large group of Indian, mostly Muslim and Hindu people who were fighting for the English army as mercenaries. Over the years, the sepoys had been treated with less respect by the English, and their salaries were decreasing as well. One of the reasons that the rebellion started was a new rifle called the Enfield rifle. The special thing about the rifle was that the bullets were covered in fat made from either pig or cow. In order to load the rifle, the Indian soldier had to bite off the top of the bullet. The soldiers knew that the fat covering the bullets were from pigs or cows, so due to religion they denied using those bullets. That led to the British execution of 85 of the sepoy soldiers in front of all the others. This episode was the spark that started the rebellion on the 10th of May in 1857. The sepoys rebelled by killing every European they met on their way. However, the British returned these brutal actions with the same kind of violence, but the British didn't distinguish between sepoys and innocent civilians. The rebellion went on for a whole year and a lot of blood was spilled. The rebellion had been called the First War of Liberation by some national Indian historians, but by the British it was described as a mutiny.
The Sepoy Rebellion was just the spark the Indians needed in the fight for Indian independence. But as they got closer to independence, they started turning against each other. The Muslims wanted their own country, but the Hindus just wanted a united country. This conflict led to the country splitting into two parts, India and Pakistan. Pakistan was the Muslim part with Jinnah as governor-general, and India was the Hindu part where Nehru became prime minister.
The partition of India meant that India was divided into two countries, Pakistan and India. The Dutiful Daughter is an English short story written by Saadat Hasan Manto in 1990, which shows the conflict between the two new nations. The story is about a Muslim mother who is looking for her daughter because she thinks she has been abducted. She searches for weeks, but in fact it turns out her daughter had voluntarily run off with a Sikh. The mother succeeds in finding her daughter, but her daughter doesn't want to face her mom. Her daughter had chosen love instead of her religion, and this is perhaps one of the reasons why the daughter doesn't want to see her mom. Choosing love above religion was rather unheard of at the time of the partition. In fact, it is so unheard of that most people would say that the daughter had probably been abducted, and this is also what her mother believes. In the end, the narrator believes or claims it is better for the mother to believe that her daughter is dead than to hear the truth. The story isn't based on a true story, but somehow it is authentic and could very well have been a real story. It depicts how dire the situation was between the Hindus and the Muslims. Today there is still conflict between the two countries, as we see in Kashmir.